All right, guys. So we got found some stuff that we're going to take care of today. Got Adam over here. We're going to set the valves, get that ready, and potentially prime the engine and get that taken care of. So as soon as I get my carburetor back, I will be able to get the distributor put in, get it fired up. So first thing first, when you're setting your valves, you want to probably either consult your engine builder, or you're going to want to get your cam card. See, on my cam card, it has valve lash hot. This is supposed to be 18. Center line is not listed there, but anyway, in that spot I wrote down what I'm going to set it as cold. So I like to set them cold. It's my preference. Partially because when they're hot, depending on how hot you get it, the metal can be quite a bit off, and unless you're setting it the same. Besides, the metal can cool a little bit as you're going around. Too many variables when it's hot, where when it's cold, it's roughly between, I don't know, 60 and 80 degrees. So, I mean, it's within 20 degrees every time. So, we're going to go ahead and start doing some of this. And we'll take you along for the ride. And we're going to take this and make this a little training opportunity. Here we go. So, my cam card says 18 hot, and we go a little bit bigger when it's cold, so we're going to do 20 cold. So I got my feeler gauge, which I pulled out the wrong one. So we are going to pull out, see that, it's real reflective, but 20 thousandths. And how I like to do this is a little bit different than most. There's 100 ways to do this, 100 ways to skin a cat. So my method is I like to follow the firing order, the 1-8, 4-3, 6-5, 7-2, just like the distributor, which I don't have the distributor in, but typically I will follow the cap. And so I'll start with intakes. Intakes are always, most people are going to know this, but intakes, if you look where the valve lines up, that's exhaust. This one's going to line up to the intake runner. This one also going to line up with the intake runner. This one lines up with the exhaust tube. So that's kind of how you know which one's which. And then also, pretty basic too, driver's side 1, 3, 5, 7, patch side 2, 4, 6, 8. And so each cylinder has intake and exhaust. So we need to go through this and set our valves. So one of the things that I do is I like to make sure that the car is set up with the starter installed. Trying to make sure my rag's not in the distributor hole too far, but I will just bump over the engine until these are the same height, and we're at the number one top dead center. That starts my firing order. So we'll bump this around and then watch. Okay, so now these are on the same stroke, so to speak. Mount it up here. Let's turn it. So we'll get these somewhat started. Okay, so they should be on the same stroke, and then I use the method of EOIC. So you set the intake when the exhaust is opening with your rocker arms here. When the push rod is pushing up by the cam, it pushes the valve open. So when this lifts, it's actually opening your valve. So we want to go through and set this when the exhaust is starting to open. So we're going to watch this. My wrench is here, and you will need a 3/16 typically for your setting these, and it does vary. I use a 5/8, on these here, the adjuster nuts, and then the 3/16 for the jamming set screws. So that's kind of the few tools you'll need. We'll bump this over to the exhaust starts to open. So now we set this, and basically we'll find our feeler gauges where we set it down. And basically you're going to want to set these. You know, let's set these to the predetermined. Okay, so you set these till basically there's kind of just a fair amount of rolling resistance. And my thing is, like, you shouldn't be able to pull them out the side. If you pull them out the side, it's not enough, but you still want it to go in there nice and smooth. So this one would be set right at the 20, and then basically you're going to want to kind of hold that right there and tighten it down. Be sure on these, I have the deflectors that run on these longer studs. You got to make sure that they're not in the way. And always double check them. So again, little resistance you roll in there, it can't slide out the side, and you definitely don't want it super duper tight either. So it's just a good way of kind of doing that. That's my method. Again, there's 100 different ways. I know there's guys that will go down the list and do like 4 or 5 at a time, intake and exhaust all at the same time, depending on where the cam is. I just follow the firing order. I do have a button set up on the external of my car, so that way I don't reach into the cockpit. But I do have that. I bump the engines over and just do 1 through 8. Or well, 1, 8, 4, 3, 6, 5, 7, 2. So when you get down the second one, second cylinder over there, you'll move on to do the exhaust, and then we do the exact opposite. We set the exhaust when the intake closes. So when we set the intake when the exhaust starts to go down, when this one starts to close is when we will set the exhaust. So it's a little confusing. It does take a time or two to get practice. And we're going to set a few here, and we're going to let him take over and see how he does. So right now, since this motor actually had the rocker studs replaced that the rocker arms sit on, we're actually going through and loosening up the lock nuts a little bit so we can make sure that they're snug, so we can see how they're moving, so we know which order to do it into. Like in Adam's case, if he's not really familiar with like the firing order because he hasn't been around much, the nice thing about my method is it helps you get familiar with the firing order. Plus, it's just a way for you to follow which way the cylinders go. So, so we did 1.
Doing the intake correct.
What's that?
Doing the intake correct.
Yep. 8. Yep. So we're doing all intakes.
Okay.
And basically, so as soon as that exhaust starts to open, we're gonna do the intake. So it just started to go there. Okay. So now you're gonna set the number 8.
Get the filler gauge.
Yep. And you can kind of, like, since these are all loose, you can kind of, if you need to hand loosen them, you can. And then the other caution too is, like, just make sure, so I'll show you here, like if you have this on here, it jams this and it won't let it kind of like wiggle.
Right.
So you'll get kind of a false reading if you leave the wrench on there. And then you just don't want it to kind of slip out the side real easy. It can move a little bit, but you just don't want it to get too carried away.
Out the side too easy?
Like sliding the side out the side.
Yeah, it won't slide.
Yep. And then you just want to be able to enter it or insert it fairly decent. Like you shouldn't have to use a bunch of force, but it's snug. You know, I was actually going to set these last night, but we had a few too many of the adult beverages down at the golf course.
Oh yeah?
Yeah.
She's a little snuggy.
Yep. Yep.
Seems a little loose, to be honest with you.
Can you slide outside? Like, not like, here. It's kind of an art.
It does the one side, but not the other.
Well, you gotta be careful because these since they have wiggle, you gotta make sure you're kind of getting them straight up and down. So yeah, like it shouldn't want to fall out, and you shouldn't be able to like pull it. So yeah, that's fine.
Fairly loose.
Well, not fairly loose,
Well,
but
not tight.
yeah, like it should take a little effort to put it in there. It shouldn't fall out on its own, and then you shouldn't be able to like sit there and you shouldn't be able to like push, and it just go whoop out the side.
Okay.
So like this, you can rotate it a little bit. It's not super tight. You can pull it right back out with minimal effort, but
I tightened it.
okay.
So it should be good to go.
What's the next one, Adam?
4.
Bingo. So that's on your side.
Right
So
there.
yep. So if you watch the exhaust, it should just start going down because again, it's in the fired order, so it's gonna.
Right.
And since we tighten them up, and as we go, some of these may loosen up pretty far, since they were all just kind of set willy-nilly.
I think that's good.
Whoa, that's really loose. And the method behind this too is, if you look at like the end view of a camshaft, it has a lobe, a high point basically, so to speak, that comes off of a base circle that lifts in the order that it's supposed to fire in. And what this method does is it kind of ensures under an assumption that basically when your exhaust is opening, the intake base circle is going to be a fairer amount past the lobe. So you're nowhere near where it ramps up or down on the cam. And that's kind of the method here. You're generalizing it in the kind of the base of the actual camshaft profile. And then when your intake is closing, your exhaust is going to be on its kind of base circle, nowhere near where it lifts or closes. And so you're trying to make sure you get on that base circle, the smooth radius of the camshaft, if so to speak. And that's just the method of making sure you're in the best spot to setting the valve. So that's what I was kind of taught. And this is the one method that seems to work really good for me. So again, just something that that I've grown accustomed to, and I really like how it works. So that's the method I use. I know there's people that will turn the crankshaft by hand like 90 degrees and do a set amount, or they turn it so many degrees off the harmonic balancer and set them, or like I said, there's guys that'll do 4 of them per revolution or something like that, something crazy. So this is also when you just bump the engine over, you limit the amount of rotations in the engine too, so you're not like whirling it over or anything crazy, which some of the other methods don't do either. But this just, once you go through it, you're pretty close to starting back over with the exhaust. So at the very least, you're spinning it maybe a little over two revolutions. So something that makes it kind of nice. So all right, I take that back. It might be more than that with the because the cam spins at half the ratio that the crankshaft does. So yeah, that's kind of how that goes.
So then 7, 5,
What?
2,
No, 184,
184,
3,
3,
6,
6,
5,
5,
7,
7,
2.
Okay.
So which one did you just do?
4.
So you did 1, 8, and 4. So I'm going to do 3. And 2, if you just watch, like you'll know, because if you guess wrong, this one will never go down. You're on the wrong one.
Okay.
So like, so this one should start to, just start going down. So that's a surefire way to know you're doing it right too. Because even if you get messed up, as long as you're following the same cylinder, exhaust opening, I'm going to do the intake. So in theory, if you got lost, you could do it. It's just that you're going to whirl the engine over a little bit more.
Okay.
That's really loose. And then you checked them when you were done, right?
Yes, sir.
Let's see what that is.
Yep.
Perfect. Oh, no. Yeah, it's pretty good. It's a pretty good idea just to double check them a few times. Spin the roller bearing a little bit just to make sure there isn't something in there or build up oil or anything goofy. So like this one ends up being a little bit tight. And so I'm not sure, like I said, how everyone else does this, but something I've learned just from tinkering. So the wrench portion of this is what sets the clearance. The Allen wrench portion of this, is what locks it. So if I loosen this, now I can adjust this. And this is what sets my gap. So one of the things is tighten it, loosen it. Just like a nut, you tighten the gap, loosen the gap. So one of the methods I do is, if I know, let's say it's loose, I know that this wrench has to go clockwise to tighten it. And just for sake's sake, this one, I will have to tighten it. I don't quite remember where it was at exactly, but when we started. But if I know, I put the wrench on in an orientation, say 12 o'clock. If I got to tighten it, I know when I'm done and everything's locked with the Allen wrench, this technically should be off to the right more than it was when I started. Or if it's tight, say if it was tight in this orientation, I would need to know that when I'm done, it's got to be in a more counterclockwise rotation. So it's just kind of a method to kind of, when you're setting these, kind of keep that in mind. So this one, I think I had to tighten just a little bit. So we'll see what this is. And I actually got really lucky on that one. It's like I was telling Adam, I mean, the big thing is you want to make sure there's enough tension too that this can't fall out. You can't pull it out to the side without really grunting it. You can kind of rotate it a little bit, no big deal. You can go in, like I said, it should go in fairly decent. Now this one does seem to have a weird spot where it does tighten up a little bit, and it is a little loose. I might have to tighten it just a little bit more, but there is a spot where so I'm gonna have to look at that. And some of these, since they haven't been ran in a while, they may not have the proper oil in them or something kind of goofy like that. So and they may just be worn out too. I tend to run these a lot longer than I need to, so that is something just to help fly. And like when you set these and check these every week, I've run into it where I found broken valve springs. So it gives you an opportunity to look through your parts and make sure nothing's awry, bearings aren't gone, these aren't bluing, to show you that it's not getting any oil. Rocker arms are still good, not bent. Everything's moving properly. Because if you go through and set them, after time they'll kind of even out and plateau. They won't be changed, need to be changed. And then just checking them is a way to make sure that everything is functioning properly, like there isn't anything broken, missing, bent, that kind of stuff. So it's a way to make sure everything keeps going in the way that it's intended to. So we just finished up setting all the intake valves. the valve lash. So we're going to go back through and set all the exhaust. We're going to start with one again. And just like we had our little statement of when the exhaust opens, we set our intake. Now we're going to, when the intake closes, important, intake closes, we're going to set our exhaust. So I know it's kind of been preaching it, but EOIC. So I set my intakes first. And again, if you think of that EO part, that's exhaust opens. You set your intakes because you don't set them when anything's opening or closing. So when your exhaust is open, you set your intakes. The last part, you do your exhaust last. The last part is IC, intake close. So when the intake starts to come closed, so when this starts to kind of retract back down onto the camshaft, after it's opened the valve all the way and it starts to come back and relieve the pressure in the spring, that's when you're going to set your exhaust. So we're going to go ahead and walk you through that here for a couple. Alright, so now we want to watch for this to go all the way down and just as it's coming back up on the roller side. So our intake is starting to go down. It's opening, almost all the way open. Right there, it starts to return back up to its relaxed position on the spring to where the valve is seating back into the head. So now we can go ahead and set our exhaust. And on my cam card, it says the same for exhaust and intake. Some of them are not. Some of them will have different. I know I have one more that's 18 and 20. I've had some that are 20, 22. So just remember, go off your cam card. If not, go off what your engine builder's specifications are. Just make sure that you're going off something that is trustworthy. If you don't know any of that, I honestly don't know if there is a good spot to kind of sit because of the cams being so different. I know there used to be like a saying that if you had your lashes, I think, set tighter, it was better for lower end RPM power. If they're a little bit looser, on the looser side, they'd be a little bit better for top end. We do not play around with that much. We kind of set them to our standard and let them be. Again, it's just something I am not real comfortable with a lot of the engine stuff. I have built my own stuff, but as far as tweaking, tuning, not really my cup of tea. So just something that keep in mind that if you had heard that before, it is possible. Talk to anyone that's good around engines. Talk to anyone that's built them, repaired them, worked on them, serviced them. That's good practice. Again, same concept. You want it tight, be able to move it, not be able to move it out the side real easy without really cranking on it. So I think this one's pretty good. So just gonna double check the lock. And when you're done, it doesn't hurt to take your 3/16 or whatever size those are. I know the stock ones don't have a lock. They are typically just a lock nut themselves, and you adjust it by just tightening them or loosening them. So, but on these, they're 3/16 set screw that actually locks the inside of the nut. So now we're gonna bump it back to 8. So Adam's gonna watch for the intake, and the intake popped up. And once you get this, you barely bump your start button and you're onto the next cylinder. And that's what I kind of like. You're not using your starter a bunch. You're not cranking the engine over a bunch. Not putting any unnecessary wear and tear on anything. It's all pretty simple, pretty small, minor movements, adjustments. I did not do a very good job here, but this motor hasn't set in a while. Make sure when you take the valve covers off, like these little galleys and stuff, just make sure that you're mindful about getting all that dirt and debris out of it so it's not getting into the engine. If you do catch anything, you've seen me notice there's a couple times I'll stick my finger in and grab like a hair or something out there. Not that a hair is going to blow up an engine, but you want these things as clean as possible. So if you can blow them out before you take the valve covers off, before you even loosen the bolts, or the nuts for the valve covers. So that's good practice to get into. I kind of slipped here and didn't have them cleaned up very well, but as far as running them every night, it is relatively clean. So you ready for the next one?
Yes, sir.
So 1, 8, 4.
Dad, do you think maybe sometime you could help me and Michael get the E down because it's all the way behind the bed? We're trying to use many things to get it, even tongs, but we can't get it.
Yeah, we'll have to see, honey.
Okay.
Just about done.
I have no idea what she just said. Something like getting an E from behind the bed.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
I think she has her name on the wall. The E from her name fell down or something like that. Must have.
1 minute is tight, next minute's loose.
Yep. And that's why it's a good way to just check to make sure there's anything wrong or bent or broke or anything. But I think these do get kind of worn out. They'll ride on one side of that bearing.
Get a flat spot.
Well, I think they just get like they wear oval shaped almost. So you'll get a spot where they feel really tight, and the next thing it'll kind of roll just a little bit too far, and then it'll get. So these are probably about due to be replaced.
When are you supposed to get your other one back?
It's done.
Oh.
That's for good honesty, Bob. I told him maybe this next week I'd come down.
It's alright.
Of course, he said the price of everything went up, so we're looking forward to that.
Oh, yeah, I bet.
So we did 4, my turn, 3.
Yep. That was one of your washers for your deflectors.
Oh, awesome.
Maybe not. That's a lock washer.
Yeah, my lock washers are back here.
Well, there's a lock washer down there.
So also, be very careful of dropping stuff into the engine off the decking. So something that we just dropped something off and heard it hit the floor. So something just to keep in mind on when. What'd you do with the there?
Where here do you get your magnet?
Right here. Oh shoot. Yeah, I thought I had it set, and then I went to tighten it, and I bumped it and loosened it, and then I over tightened it again.
I don't have any lock washers over here, so it must have been the said.
Well, I don't have lock washers either, though.
Huh?
I don't have any lock washers for this. This is the. I don't know what that is for.
Okay.
We'll find out if we need it, I guess.
Yep.
Perfect. So 3, then we go on to 6. And then final step that I like to do just to make sure that we're doing everything properly and stuff is just go through, take your lock wrench, the Allen wrench, just make sure you shouldn't find any loose ones. If you found loose ones, it probably wasn't set, at least for your first time doing rockers for the year where they've been loosened up, or if you're changing out rockers, changing springs, anything where you've had the rockers off, just go through and just double check, make sure that they're all tight, snugged. I'll do that upside here quick just to make sure, because I've had it even myself where you go to do rockers and you'll maybe accidentally do an intake twice, even though it's kind of impossible to do if you follow like our method. And that's the nice way is you know you're doing one cylinder at a time and you're doing one valve at a time because the other one should be moving. So just something to keep in mind. So looks like that's all done. We'll take a step back, probably get the priming tool out and start priming it, make sure we got oil pumped through, and then as soon as we get our carburetor, we can start putting the rest of the stuff in, and we should be ready to rock and roll. So we're gonna go ahead and get started doing the priming of the oil pump system. So this engine has been fired before, but it also sat for a year, so I just want to prime to get the oil back up on top of the rockers and through all the oil galleys and whatnot. So we're gonna go through it, go ahead and do it again. This is the tool that you need. If you notice, it's got a center shaft that spins freely from the base, and that hooks onto the actual oil pump down in that hole there. You can see it down in there, but and then you hook a drill on this. Word of caution that I would say when you go to use this tool, definitely make sure it's clean before you put it in there. I just wiped it down with a rag, and then set it down in there and make sure it grabs, and you'll kind of feel it click in there. And use a drill that is of the corded variety. Is a warning that I've been given, and I personally know about this. If you use a cordless drill, it is very, very hard on them because of the extended time you need to run these. It's hard on the batteries, and it's hard on the drills themselves. So definitely find yourself an old corded drill. I have an old corded drill that I've kind of had and used for a while. So we're going to get that out, fire it up, and we'll show you how it goes. So the trick here, we got our drill hooked up to our priming tool. It's down in the distributor hole, hooked to the... So on all the rocker arms, see these little tiny indents that kind of taper down? Those are all oil extensions, kind of like the oil galley. So oil will flow up the push rods out this, and it'll trickle down in deep down in there to get to those balls. So we need to spin this over. It takes some time until all of these have, in our case, it's going to be kind of a greenish oil because we're on the Brad Pen oil, pen grade, whatever it's called. But we're going to make sure every single one of these, so there's 16 of them in this engine that have oil trickling down into the balls there. So we will fire this up and see what happens. And then I found sometimes, especially when it's like colder, stopping every 10-15 seconds just to let the oil kind of refill kind of the pickup tube and the oil pump, just so it can kind of help fill back in its void. So anything on your side yet?
Nope.
And see, this one has started to, you can see the oil starting to flow out of it. And I got one down here on number 5, so we got one on 7, one on 5, and Adam's got a couple, so we're getting there. Like I said, just setting a little bit, and you can see how hard it is on the drill. It's got a pretty good amount of resistance. Well, you can't see it, but you can tell it just has a lot of preload in the drill. So we'll keep going until we get all these pumping. How you doing on your side?
4 of them are dry.
Yep. 1, 2, I got 3 dry. It is important to note too that you want to have this on the right hand clockwise orientation for the drill. That will help spin the oil pump in the correct direction. And sometimes it does help too, and I'll do it right now. Just bump your engine over just like 90 degrees, and that will help potentially align the oil galleys and passages just a little bit better. Two left. I got 3. There's that one finally pumping. Still got
One more down.
one here and one here yet. And there's always a couple that end up being just a little bit tough, and depending on how the pastures all line up, take a little extra, you know, rotation on the engine and stuff. So. And the second to last one's pumping. We'll just do this one. Hey, fair on your side yet?
Good.
You got all of them?
Yep.
Oh, dang it, Adam won. I still got one on my side. And it just goes to show you how long it takes the oil to kind of pass through some of these passages. So making sure it's primed is a good way to prevent failure right off the get-go. So this should be something you should do at the very least every time you start up an engine that's been rebuilt or built. And then I like to do it just on all the engines that have sat for a while, like this one. Again, it's been sitting a year. We had it repaired, so it's been apart. So we're just trying to make sure we get to a point where this is got oil everywhere, and all the components that move, rock, rotate, everything like that. So keep going. Last one just right up. So that is all she wrote. So we are good. That will conclude our priming of this engine. It's today's episode. So you don't need to go full wide open with the drill. You probably can, but considering like how fast the crankshaft spins in relation to the camshaft, you know, it spins half the RPM, so you don't need to get too carried away. And typically it pumps enough oil even at kind of lower RPMs when you're running it. But it's only, I'm guessing the engine itself is probably 50, 55 degrees. So it's on the colder side. Oil's plenty thick, so don't rush it. Just go nice and slow. I usually use like a half-speed throttle. Stop every 10, 15 seconds. Kind of let the oil pump catch up, kind of refill itself, and then pump through. And then, yeah, as you go along, you can see all these have kind of oil down in there around the pivot balls. Every single one of them has burped oil down, and you can see on the bottom there's oil running. There's oil down in the head there. Adam's got all his done, so should be good to go. We'll get this probably spun over to top dead center, which just for those that aren't watching, there's a line down there on our harmonic balancer, and we try and line it up with the pointer and have these two in a fully closed position, and then that way we will be able to drop our distributor in, and we might maybe do that later. We'll see how rambunctious we get, but we'll have it one step closer. All right, so we want to put the distributor in, and it's a good thing we had to take it apart because we found these components laying in the distributor. When we heard something hit the floor, we looked down and seen this array. So this is not what it's supposed to be. And you can see this brass piece is supposed to be the center plunger of the coil. And it's got all sorts of scrapes and gouges all over. So we're honestly, and the rotor itself must have come off because one of the bolts is broke and the other one's loose. And you can look down here, it's also a lot dirtier than what normally is expected, which is a telltale sign something's going on. And then right there in that hole right, let's see if I can point there, right there, there's still part of the screw in there, and the other one's gone. So we will not be putting the distributor in, and we will probably be getting a new distributor on the way. So good thing we decided to do that now before it came time to fire this thing up. So yeah, so just more race car things. But on that note, we'll probably kind conclude this episode. For now, we another update. I got some tires mounted, and I might show some more on that in an upcoming video. Trying to get ready for our setup day at the chassis builder. We're hunting down some tires to see what we can put on there. He has some prerequisites for the tires that we have mounted, so we were going through and checking some tires and we didn't find anything, so we're gonna have to keep digging, see what we can find for tires. But we also need the carburetor and stuff so we can get all the, for sure, 100% race ready components on here, waiting on bumpers yet. So but yeah, we'll conclude this. Thanks for watching. If you haven't already, subscribe to my channel, like the videos, leave a comment. I do share these on my Facebook page, Wagner Motorsports 79W, I believe is what it's called. So feel free to give that page a follow. I also, on the lighter side of my racing, I have a TikTok that's just Wagner_79. Feel free to follow me on there, liking my videos. It's got some fun content on there. I keep it pretty light and fun on there. So I keep this light and fun too. So still waiting on the wrap too. I'm hoping any day here Josh will be getting me the proof for that, and we will be getting that lined up. And race season is right around the corner, so look forward to seeing y'all at our local tracks and anywhere we'll be traveling to hopefully this year. So with that, thanks for watching.